Hey guys, today's story is a little different. Because it starts with something so small, so seemingly harmless, that you'd miss it if you weren't already carrying years of invisible weight. The kind that presses on your chest during family dinners, in old photo albums where your face is always just slightly out of frame. My name's Vincent, I'm 34, I build digital infrastructure for resort logistics, yes, the stuff that keeps private islands running, and I'm telling this story not out of bitterness, but because sometimes, the best way to end a lie is with the truth. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if someone's ever made you feel like you didn't belong in your own family. Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. It started, like so many things do in my family, with a group text. Hey guys! Retreat week coming up. Can't wait to see you all at Lake Wyland. Then the logistics, arrival times, who's bringing what, how many beds there are. Except I wasn't on that list. I wasn't asked what I could bring. And when I texted back, just confirming what day should I fly in, my sister replied with a soft slap. Oh shoot, Vincent, I think we might be at capacity this year. Just didn't realize until we did the bed count. Hope that's okay. It was followed by a flurry of images, sad faces, hearts, a laughing face like it was all just quirky sibling chaos. But I knew what it really was. It was code. It was, you're not wanted. You don't belong. We had room, just not for you. You might be thinking, okay, maybe it was an honest oversight. But you'd have to rewind 2 decades to understand. You'd have to watch my parents fawn over my younger brother Tyler like he invented air, while I brought home scholarships and silence. You'd have to sit through the Thanksgiving when my startup made its first million and my dad said, well, as long as you're not getting too arrogant, while clapping Tyler on the back for getting promoted to assistant manager at a car dealership. This family had space for everyone else's ego, just not my existence. Still, I told myself I was being dramatic. That was my curse. I'd internalized the idea that my pain was inconvenient, that it needed to be palatable or quiet. I didn't reply to the retreat message. I didn't argue. I just sat with the sentence. I think we might be at capacity. Like it was a bruise I kept pressing to make sure it still hurt. But here's the thing about being left out, it creates space. And sometimes, that space becomes a plan. What none of them knew, not my sister, not my parents, not Tyler or the in-laws or the cousins or their golden retriever, was that the company I'd built over the past 10 years had just quietly closed on a development partnership with the Lake Wyland Property Group. You know those luxury cabins with the helicopter pads and private beaches? Yeah. My company handled their logistics now. I had access. More than access, I had pull. So when I pulled up the system dashboard and saw the exact cabins my family had reserved, something in me clicked. Something cold, mechanical, surgical. I didn't scream. I didn't send a long rant in the group chat. I just looked at the digital bookings and canceled them. Every single one. Then, I rebooked them under my own name. All 10 cabins. Paid in full. And just to ensure I'd have complete control of the island for that week, I booked the maintenance crews, the ferry schedule, even the catering staff. That island, from July 2nd to July 9th, would be mine. They didn't even know yet. But it wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about presence. About taking up the space I'd been told didn't exist. The same way they'd taken up the space in my head for years. The best part? The next group text came 2 days later. Weird issue, our cabin reservation disappeared? Anyone else having trouble? My mom jumped in with, just called Lake Wyland and they're saying the whole island is booked privately. Can you believe the timing? I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I called the property manager and said, "Hey, I might need a little help arranging a proper welcome." He replied, "You want luxury or dramatic?" I said, "Let's go with restrained power." Because I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just taking the space, they were going to walk into it. Feel it. Sit in it. With their luggage in their hands and nowhere to go. And I'd be watching from the cliffs above, with a view they would never forget. The first time I understood what it meant to be optional in my own family, I was 10 years old. My brother Tyler had just taken third place in a regional swim meet. Third place. My parents were ecstatic. They called up the whole family, made dinner reservations, even got a custom cake printed with his face in a swim cap. When we arrived at the restaurant, the waitress asked, "So what are we celebrating tonight?" I just opened my mouth to say something about winning a statewide math championship. But before I could speak, my dad clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "We're here for our swimmer." Big day. That hand was heavy. Not in weight, but in message. Sit down. Be quiet. This one's not for you. That's the kind of thing that doesn't just hurt once. It echoes, reshapes the air you breathe in a house where you're always half invisible. From then on, Tyler's accomplishments, no matter how minor, and spotlight dinners, social media posts, and family hugs that seemed to last longer than they should. Mine? They were footnotes. A full scholarship to one of the best engineering schools in the country? I got a thumbs-up text. Starting my own tech firm at 23 that turned its first profit within 6 months? Silence. But when Tyler bought a used BMW, they threw a backyard party. Balloons and all. They didn't hate me. That's what made it worse. They liked me just enough to not feel guilty about excluding me. So when I decided to book that island, it wasn't about cruelty. It was about precision. It was about finally being seen, not with rage, not with begging, but with presence. I made one call to the ferry company and reserved the entire island for the week. Told them it was for a company retreat. Technically Trimmy Company, my team. No one questioned it. No one asked who I was. Money tends to remove those kinds of questions. They even offered to reroute any unrelated visitors and restrict the first ferry runs to my staff and guests. I accepted. I flew in early. Monday morning. It was quiet, and the lake stretched out like a sheet of brushed steel. I stood alone on the dock as crates of wine and Wagyu beef and fresh-cut flowers were offloaded. The chefs, the event crew, the housekeepers all hired to give the illusion of celebration. I wasn't throwing a party. I was laying a stage. The staff looked at me the way people look at someone who knows exactly what he's doing. I let them think that. Maybe they were right. The cabin I claimed wasn't the biggest, but it had the highest view. From my deck, I could see the dock, the trail winding down to the lodge, the cabins nestled in the trees, all the ones we used to share on those family retreats that somehow never had room for me. This time, I made sure every cabin was stocked, cleaned, and locked. Each had a note placed on the bed inside, just 3 words. Try again later. It was the gentlest thing I could think of. By Thursday, my family chat lit up. Tyler dropped the first hint. Looks like the retreat is booked solid this year. Total mess. Then my mom. That's strange. It's always open this time of year. My dad followed. We'll just show up. Whoever's there will understand. That made me laugh. Saturday morning, I sat on the lodge patio, sipping espresso, reading a book I wasn't really absorbing. I heard the boat before I saw it. Familiar voices drifting over the water. When it docked, I recognized the silhouettes: me, mom, dad, Tyler, his wife, their 2 kids. Everyone dressed for a weekend of comfort. I didn't move. I let them spot me first. They hesitated when they stepped onto the dock. My dad narrowed his eyes. My mom tilted her head. Vincent? She asked, as if unsure. I nodded once. Morning. My dad was blunt. What are you doing here? Book the island, I said calmly. You mean a cabin? No, I replied. The island. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. It cut through everything. Tyler stepped forward, half a scoff in his voice. Wait, what? I reserved the entire island. Staff, cabins, dock, food, everything. For the week. There was a pause. You could hear the breeze shift. My mom looked around like reality had cracked open. But we've come here every year. I looked at her directly. Except the years there wasn't enough room. Right? No one answered. I've got a meeting in 15 minutes, I added, motioning to the lodge behind me. Staff will need the dock cleared soon. There's a guest shuttle coming in. And just like that, it shifted. My dad's face fell. Tyler looked like he'd been slapped. No one yelled. No one defended themselves. They just picked up their bags and turned around. I watched them leave. Not with spite. With closure. It didn't happen all at once, but something in me had started to freeze over. The kind of slow hardening that creeps in quietly unnoticeable at first. Like fog rolling in over warm ground, it takes its time, and by the time you realize you're surrounded, it's too late to outrun it. I was done begging to be included in a family that had made it so abundantly clear I was optional. I was done explaining why I mattered. That summer, while they were swapping laughing selfies on a dock I wasn't welcome to stand on, I was crafting something else entirely, a memory they'd never be able to scrub from their minds. You see, what they didn't know was that 2 years earlier, I'd met someone. Her name was Elise, a travel writer with a penchant for finding hidden gems that looked like postcards came to life. She introduced me to a private island she once featured in a magazine spread, a place so secluded, it didn't even show up on Google Maps. We took a boat out once, just the two of us, and I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. When my family sent that half-hearted text that there wouldn't be enough room this year, I knew exactly where I'd be going instead. And not just going, I was going to own the moment. I booked the entire island. Full buyout. Staff, chef, transportation. 3 days just before their trip. I didn't even tell Elise right away. Some moments need to simmer before you serve them cold. I didn't broadcast it. I didn't post about it. I wasn't trying to brag. That's not my style. Instead, I hired a local photographer, one with a gift for the kind of shots that whisper louder than any scream, and I gave her only one instruction. Make it unforgettable, but quiet. Like revenge dressed in linen. She delivered. Sun-kissed shots of me paddle boarding over glass-clear water. Aerial drone views of the estate's private cliffside dinner setup. The hammock scene. The fire pit scene. It was too cinematic not to sting. And when the time came, I didn't even send them the pictures. I just posted them to my feed with one caption. Found a little room of my own this year. The silence was immediate and loaded. A few likes. Fewer comments. No calls. Not one. Not even from my brother, who usually at least had the decency to shoot a thumbs-up emoji my way when I posted something personal. But I didn't need their reaction. I already had it. That was the beauty of it. They didn't need to respond for me to know I'd hit something raw. 2 weeks later, my cousin Kayla texted me, drunk if I had to guess, or maybe just loose-lipped in a way that only betrayal could unlock. Just so you know, Aunt Marie cried when she saw your post. Said she didn't know you had that kind of money. They thought you were still struggling. Still struggling. After all these years. After the promotions, the 2 businesses, the quiet building I'd been doing brick by brick. That's what they thought of me. I was the kid who was always a little behind. Always a little small. They didn't know I'd spent 5 years designing logistics software that was now used by 3 of the top freight companies in the region. Or that I'd quietly sold my second startup to a German firm and never mentioned it. They didn't know I'd grown beyond their frame because they never turned the picture around. So no, I didn't need to be on that dock with them. I had carved a place that was mine by invitation only, and they hadn't earned the ticket. For once, I wasn't the one trying to prove I belong. I was the one choosing who didn't. And that feeling? That silence I got to hold in my hands like a stone worn smooth by years of friction? That was the moment I knew I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. The next time my mom called me, it wasn't to ask how I was doing. It was to ask if I'd be coming to Thanksgiving because your father would like to keep things civil. Civil. As if their absence from my life had been some kind of paperwork dispute, and not a years-long decision to treat me like the footnote on a family tree. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't. Instead, I went back to that island alone this time. No photographer. No fanfare. Just me, a notepad, and the ocean. And that night, sitting under a sky so wide it could swallow grudges whole, I wrote down one sentence that stuck with me even now. Maybe the space they never gave you was exactly what you needed to find your own. And that was it. The shift. Not a climax. Not a confrontation. Just a decision, calm, final, irreversible. I was no longer interested in proving anything to them. I didn't need them to see me. I had seen myself, and what I saw didn't need their approval. I wasn't some abandoned branch off the family tree. I was a different seed entirely. And I'd found my own soil. It didn't happen all at once, but something in me had started to freeze over. The kind of slow hardening that creeps in quietly unnoticeable at first. Like fog rolling in over warm ground, it takes its time, and by the time you realize you're surrounded, it's too late to outrun it. I was done begging to be included in a family that had made it so abundantly clear I was optional. I was done explaining why I mattered. That summer, while they were swapping laughing selfies on a dock I wasn't welcome to stand on, I made my own kind of memory. One they'd never forget, even if they tried. What they didn't know was that 2 years earlier, I'd met someone. Her name was Elise, a travel writer with a gift for uncovering hidden places that didn't just look like paradise, they felt like the answer to a prayer you didn't know you'd said. She introduced me to a private island she once featured in a luxury spread. The place didn't even show up on Google Maps. You had to charter a boat or helicopter just to get there. We went once, just to scout it out, and I remember standing on the sand, feeling something in my chest go quiet for the first time in years. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty but complete. So when my family sent that half-hearted text about not enough room this year, I didn't even blink. I picked up the phone, called the island's concierge directly, and said 5 words I'd never imagined saying. I want to book everything. The entire estate. The staff. The chef. The shoreline. I didn't ask about cost. Not because I wanted to brag, but because I was ready to stop asking permission to stop shrinking. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about vision. I didn't post anything right away. I didn't send a single message. Instead, I hired a local photographer, someone with an eye for restraint, for beauty that lingers without screaming for attention. I gave her one instruction. Make it unforgettable, but quiet. Like revenge dressed in linen. She understood. What she delivered was a set of photographs that looked like serenity bottled. Me paddle boarding across mirrored water. A shot from the drone capturing the cliffs at sunset. The silhouette of me in the firelight, holding nothing but a glass of wine and stillness. Every image looked like it came from someone who had nothing left to chase because he'd already caught everything that mattered. Then I posted one. Just one. No caption. Just a soft photo of my legs crossed in a hammock, the turquoise water stretching out to infinity behind me. The kind of image that made people lean closer and squint not because they couldn't see, but because they couldn't believe. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. A few likes. No comments. No calls. Not even from my brother, who usually threw a lazy heart emoji my way if I posted anything personal. But that wasn't the goal. I didn't need engagement. I didn't need applause. What I wanted, what I got, was the undeniable truth settling like fog around the people who had ignored me for years. I didn't need them to elevate me. I'd already risen. A week passed before I heard anything. And when I did, it came not from my parents, but from Kayla, my cousin. She was drunk, maybe, or just carelessly honest. Aunt Marie cried when she saw your photo. She texted. They thought you were still struggling. Guess you're not. The implication was clear. They had boxed me in so tightly for so long, they never noticed when I quietly stepped out. They had missed every promotion, every expansion, every sacrifice and sleepless night that built the man they couldn't see. Still struggling. That's how they'd spoken about me behind closed doors. Not ambitious. Not driven. Not loyal. Just struggling. But now they didn't know how to categorize me. I'd become unplaceable. Unreachable. Unapologetically outside their system of measurement. I didn't respond to Kayla. I didn't need to. My answer had already been delivered in salt wind and soft linen. I didn't need to speak. I just needed to remain still. Thanksgiving came, and with it, a call from my mother. It wasn't an invitation. It was a negotiation. Your father would like to keep things civil, she said, as if her past indifference could be washed away with politeness. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't. Instead, I booked the island again, this time alone. No guests. No photos. No intention of performance. Just me, a notebook, and the sea. And there, under a blanket of stars with no one watching, I made peace with something that had haunted me my whole life, the need to be chosen. That hunger for approval, that ache for a chair at the family tabloid had evaporated, burned away by my own fire. I had built something they couldn't even comprehend, let alone replicate. And I did it without them. That night, I wrote one line in my notebook. Just one. It read, "You don't need to prove anything to people who decided they'd never look." I slept better than I had in years. By the time my parents started noticing something was off, the threads had already been pulled too far to stitch back. That's the thing about silent sites, not always peace. Sometimes it's planning. And I had been planning for months. The power in this kind of revenge wasn't in the explosion. It was in the vacuum that follows when the person you pushed away stops begging to be let back in. I didn't call to argue. I didn't write some emotional appeal. I sent a single-line reply to the retreat invitation that read, "Unavailable this year. Hope you enjoy." And I left it at that. But behind that one line was the quiet execution of a move that didn't just change the location, it changed the board. See, once I found out where they were staying for the family retreat, I started digging. Not for dirt, just for opportunity. It turns out the island was privately owned and leased on seasonal terms. It wasn't a resort in the traditional sense, it was a secluded stretch of paradise rented by the ultra-wealthy, the type of place you don't find on travel sites, only whispered about in circles I now had access to. When I contacted the holding company, I came not as the rejected son, but as an investor. My net worth spoke louder than my last name ever had. Within 3 weeks of inquiry, we entered negotiations. They weren't eager to sell at first. But everyone has a price. And more than that, everyone has a timeline. Their current lease ended precisely 2 days after their retreat would wrap. And that was when my offer activated $18 million wired, clean and quiet, in exchange for full ownership with no transitional announcement. I asked for one condition: no press release, no signage change, and no disclosure until the sale had cleared. That meant during the retreat, they'd have no clue whose island they were standing on. Until I wanted them to know. I didn't need a confrontation. I needed symbolism. Owning the island wasn't about ego, it was about narrative. All my life, I had been erased from the center of their story, turned into a side character who didn't quite fit into the glossy family photo. So instead of asking to be included, I wrote myself into the soil. I bought the land beneath their privilege. Not to take it from them, but to show I never needed it in the first place. I flew in the day before they arrived. I stayed in the service quarters by choice, not necessity. I walked the grounds. Touched the walls. I sat in the same spot they had gathered for drinks every year and left a small change behind, a flower that didn't grow natively there, placed in a carved bowl I had shipped in from a country they couldn't even name on a map. The staff noticed. No one said anything. That's the beauty of discretion bought with respect and generous pay. I left before sunrise, but not before leaving behind one breadcrumb. The next day, I waited. The brochure was my quiet little grenade. One of the resort assistants, whether by mistake or intuition, left it on the table during breakfast. Cream-colored, elegantly folded, with the resort's name embossed in gold. It wasn't flashy, just premium. On the back page, in subtle serif type, it read, "Now under the stewardship of its new private owner, Mr. J. Albright." My full name. No mistake. My sister saw it first. She said nothing at first, but the color drained from her face like water slipping through cupped hands. She passed it to her husband, who didn't understand. My mother noticed the silence before she saw the brochure. When she did, she reached for her phone like the screen would somehow confirm it wasn't true. But there was no glitch. No prank. No one laughing behind a curtain. It was real. And that's when the unraveling began. Voicemails started stacking up. Texts pinged in. My brother tried calling from the golf course, the one I used to mow as a teen during those same retreats, because everybody pitches in. Now he was asking, "Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't answer. I didn't block them either. I let the message sit unopened. Read receipts off. I wanted them to feel the uncertainty that used to keep me up at night. The wondering. The unimportance. The family group chat, which I hadn't been part of for over a year, suddenly re-added my number. A message came through from my mom. "We should talk." No punctuation. No apology. And still I didn't respond. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The island wasn't a revenge play. It was a declaration. I had outgrown the need for their approval. And now they were guests on my property without knowing it. The irony wrote itself. When I woke the morning after the retreat ended, I had 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and a photo from the groundskeeper. It was a snapshot of the family standing near the villa entrance, all looking in different directions. My brother's posture slumped in confusion. My sister stared down at the brochure like it had betrayed her. And my father, well, he wasn't even looking at the camera. He was staring off toward the water, the same dock where I used to be sent to carry their luggage while they laughed from the balcony. I didn't call back. I didn't gloat. I simply texted the resort manager to confirm that the new security protocols were now in place for future visits. No bookings under the Albright family name unless cleared by me. It wasn't about revenge, it was about boundaries. You see, the moment I bought that island, I wasn't trying to force anyone out. I was giving them a taste of what it feels like to be the afterthought, the one with no seat, the person always left outside the frame. Now, for the first time, the frame was mine. And they could only watch. In the days that followed, my mom tried to reach out again. This time, she sent an email, something formal, like she was trying to hold on to structure. "We'd like to speak. Perhaps we misunderstood." No apology. Just the word misunderstood, trying to cover a decade of deliberate choices. I didn't answer that either. My sister's message was more candid. "You made your point. Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Was I happy? No. But I was something better. I was free. There was a version of me that might have sent a message back, something cruel or clever. But the person I'd become didn't need to play the game anymore. My silence spoke more than any sentence I could have crafted. The only person who didn't reach out was my father. And that told me everything. Because for years, I'd bent my spine in hopes of one single sentence said plainly. "I'm proud of you." He never said it. Not when I made my first million. Not when I bought their dream house to relieve them of mortgage stress. Not when I bailed out my brother's startup with no expectation of return. Not once. But now that I owned the soil under their family tradition, his silence wasn't just absence. It was discomfort. He didn't know how to process a version of me that didn't need him anymore. It was around this time that I made my second move. I didn't stop at the island. I took a stake in the neighboring eco-reserve land they had always admired from afar but never stepped foot on. I didn't buy it to keep them out. I bought it because I could. And because the boy who had once been denied space had finally learned to make his own. This was no longer about them. It was about legacy. 3 months later, I hosted a retreat of my own. Not for family, at least not by blood. I invited former mentors, the high school teacher who saw something in me when no one else did, the friend who paid my bus fare when I couldn't afford to get to my college interview. People who had poured into me without asking for anything back. I flew them in first class. I put their names on welcome banners. I gave them the weekend I had always wanted for myself, the one I had watched from the shadows year after year. And they knew. They felt it. One of the old economics professor pulled me aside and said, "This place feels like it was made by someone who had everything taken and decided to never feel small again." And he was right. It wasn't about showing off. It was about proving first to myself, then to others that I wasn't invisible. In the center of the main villa, I had a plaque installed. It wasn't grand. It was a piece of wood, engraved in quiet script. For the ones they overlooked. May your silence never mean your absence. It didn't name names. It didn't call anyone out. But every person who saw it nodded. Some with a tear. Some with a soft laugh. Because they knew. The ones who had been left out always know. My family never returned to the island. The lease expired, and no one renewed. I heard from a former staffer that they'd started going to some inland resort in the south, somewhere less private, more crowded. I imagined them checking in with fake smiles, pretending to enjoy themselves while trying not to mention the name printed in gold at the back of that brochure. That was the last move I made. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't require repeats. It echoes. And it never begs to be noticed. It's strange what silence can carry. Not bitterness. Not anger. But distance, the kind you earn, not escape. In the months after everything settled, I realized something about myself that I hadn't dared to before. I was never trying to replace them. I was just trying to matter to them. That was the mistake. You can't win love from people who hoard it like property. You can't earn a seat from those who built the table just to face away from you. So I stopped knocking. What grew in that silence was something else entirely. Peace. Not the loud, cinematic kind, but the stillness of waking up and no longer needing to defend who you are. I used to think revenge was about watching someone suffer. Now I know it's about choosing not to suffer for them anymore. My family saw me as a resource. A donor. A name on a check. When I stopped being useful, I became disposable. But they forgot something. Even a ghost can own land. I don't visit the island often now. I don't need to. It's not a monument to pain. It's a reminder that I built something when no one believed I could. It's a story I don't need to retell, because the ocean holds it for me. And when I sit at the edge of that dock, looking out at the same waves that once swallowed my pride, I feel something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for them, but for the journey they forced me to take. Because in the end, their rejection didn't break me. It revealed me. And that was the best thing they ever gave me without meaning to.